My name is Jason Perot, Chairman, and I call to order this Monday, September 13th, 2021, regular meeting of the Northborough Board of Selectmen. Before we begin, I have to go through some preliminaries for a remote meeting. This open meeting of the Northborough Board of Selectmen is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which is referenced at the top of our posted agenda for tonight's meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. This meeting is being conducted remotely using the Zoom conferencing application. Our posted meeting agenda notes the various means by which the meeting can be viewed. You can connect to the Zoom webinar link. You can connect to Zoom via phone for audio only. You can see the live stream via YouTube link. If you go to the town website, click the remote meetings button. And you can watch via local cable access channels Verizon 30 and Charter 192. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Be aware that other folks may be able to see you. Take care not to share your screen on the computer, and anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. To cover some basic ground rules for the meeting for clear and effective communication and conduct of our business, and to ensure accurate meeting minutes, I will introduce each agenda item and its speaker. After the speaker concludes the presentation, I will invite board members to offer their comments, questions, or motions. If the agenda item is a public hearing, I will invite public comments specific to that matter at that time. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you. If members wish to respond to other members, please request to do so through the chair. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. If you wish to be recognized, please raise your hand and hold until your name is called. Please remember to mute your microphone when not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate meeting minutes. I'd like to now confirm access by the participants of tonight's meeting. First, the members of the board. I'm Jason Perot, Chairman. Leslie Rattan, Vice Chair.
Present.
Scott Rogers, Clerk.
Present.
And Julianne Hirsch, Member.
Present.
We've received word earlier that member Kristen Wickstead will not be able to attend tonight's meeting. I'd now like to check with members of town staff who are going to be on for the meeting. Town Administrator John Coder.
Present.
Assistant Town Administrator Becca Meekins.
Present.
Finance Director Jason Little.
Present.
Public Works Director Scott Charpentier.
Present.
And our Fire Chief and host of tonight's Zoom meeting, Dave Parenti.
Present.
Thank you all. We will also identify other participants in the meeting as they come in for their respective agenda items. For public comment tonight, I'll go through the procedure when we reach that point in the agenda for the details of how we'll conduct that. And I believe that concludes our preliminaries. And we can proceed now with the agenda. The first item of business, approval of the August 23rd, 2021 meeting minutes, which were enclosed in our packets for this meeting. Do I have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Scott Rogers.
I move we approve the August 23rd, 2021 meeting minutes as submitted.
Second.
Moved by Scott Rogers, seconded by Leslie Rattan. Any discussion? Seeing none, this is a roll call vote. Julianne Hirsch.
Aye.
Scott Rogers.
Aye.
Leslie Rattan.
Aye.
And I, Jason Perot, vote aye, so carries 4 in the affirmative. The next item of business, if we can bring in our applicant chief.
He's on the way.
Right. Next item of business, it's past the hour of 7 PM and we have change of manager. To consider an application from Margarita's Restaurant Group, Northborough Incorporated, doing business as Tia Juan's Margarita's Mexican Restaurant, to change the manager of their all alcoholic beverages restaurant license for premises located at 10006 Shops Way. Good evening, Mr. Jesus Camillo, is that right?
Yes,
Hello, how are you this evening?
I'm good. What about you?
Very good. Just want to check with you. You're representing for Margaritas this evening?
Correct.
Yeah. And can you just kind of walk through and explain what's being proposed here this evening?
The change of manager for the liquor.
And you are going to be the new manager of record for this?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I'll note for the record that we have a submission by Lieutenant Brian Griffin, who does the background checks for the managers for these. Lieutenant Griffin has no concerns to present to the board, so there are no objections in that regard. Members of the board, any questions or comments? Leslie?
Also wanted to make note that Lieutenant Griffin had added that Mr. Camillo has extensive background in the food and beverage business and that you are tip certified.
Yes.
Very good. Mr. Camillo, could you just briefly describe your past experience?
Well, I've been working for Margaritas for 5 years. I worked at different locations like Walton, Salem, New Hampshire, Methuen, Massachusetts. So I've been doing this for a long time.
Very good. Thank you. Board members, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I move the board vote to approve the application to change the manager as submitted by Margarita's Restaurant Group, Northborough, Inc., doing business as Tio Juan's Margarita's Mexican Restaurant for their all alcoholic beverages restaurant license for premises located at 10006 Shops Way.
Second.
Moved by Scott Rogers. I think I had the first second from Leslie Wittan and the second from Julianne. This is a roll call vote. Julianne Hirsch.
Aye.
Scott Rogers.
Aye.
Leslie Wittan.
Aye.
And I, Jason Perot, vote aye. So that carries 4 in the affirmative. Thank you, Mr. Camillo. It is approved, and we thank you for being with us here tonight.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
It's now past the hour of 7:05 PM, and we have Skip Doyle for the Rotary Club, update on Applefest Street Fair, and request to close Blake Street on September 18th, 2021 from 7 AM to 5 PM. Hello?
That's better.
Can you hear
There
us?
you go. Yes. Skip, we also have Pat Doyle with us here this evening. So
We
glad
sort
to have you both with us.
of go together.
Yep, yep.
So
Why don't you go ahead and describe what you're proposing? I'm certainly familiar to some of us here, but explain what's going on for Applefest.
So John and select persons, thank you for having us on. Does that sound familiar at all? We primarily come before you to ask that on the 18th, Saturday, we ask permission that Blake Street be closed for the day up until probably about 5 o'clock-ish or so.
We just want you to know that there'll be a few fewer vendors this year. We'll be socially distancing, but there'll be good food and good music and a chance for neighbors to socially distance and have some camaraderie maybe with people they haven't seen for a while. So it will be fun, it will be different, but it will be in person, and we're excited about it as a Rotary Club.
Indeed.
Okay. Very good. Certainly an event that's been very popular at past Apple Fests, and typically a great turnout of various vendors and booths and everything. I know I've enjoyed it.
Lots of
Mem-
local groups are going to be part of it, the Historical
Right.
Society, et cetera. So it will be a good community event.
Right. And all concentrated on Blake Street. Very easy to go from booth to booth and get a complete sampling of everything going on in town. Members of the board, any questions or comments? Leslie.
Thank you very much for being here, Skip and Pat. We appreciate it very, very much, and all your work. I know a lot goes into this planning. So did you have to cut down on a fair number of booths in order to have the space the way you wanted?
Well, I guess we could say that it was sort of self-selection. There are people who, for one reason or another, are not going to be able to be with us, and so we will have space in between. We don't want to spread it out too much, so we're going to take a look at how it's going to look. The road has been paved a little bit, so there are spaces missing. There's the spaces that we've marked over the years, so we can extend it a little and make some booths larger and some smaller. So we'll accommodate all.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board vote to close Blake Street on Saturday, September 18th, 2021, between the hours of 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. for the annual Apple Fest Street Fair.
Second.
Moved by Julianne Hirsch, seconded by Scott Rogers. This is a roll call vote. Julianne Hirsch,
Aye.
Scott Rogers,
Aye.
Leslie Rattan,
Aye.
and I, Jason Pro, vote aye. Carries in the affirmative. So Blake Street is going to be the site of excitement on Saturday, the 18th, between the hours of 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. We encourage everyone to visit there during the day and see all the activity that's going on and support your local Rotary Club.
If we could, for one moment, really quickly, the Northborough Rotary Club really would like to express their feelings and their goodwill to our first responders who have had such an awful couple of weeks. Where our hearts and our prayers are with all of you who have been so busy and so taken up by these tragedies. Anything we can ever do to help, remember the Northborough Rotary Club is there to help you. So thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, Pat. That's very lovely sentiment of support. And I think that will do it, and we'll expect to see you on Saturday then.
Yeah, thank you.
See you Saturday.
Good night, folks. Next up, we have, it's past the hour of 7:10 p.m. and we have Michelle Gillespie, Apple Fest Committee Chair, presentation of 2021 Apple Fest events. And along with Michelle, we have Karen Brewster for Burroughs Cares for Troops.
Here we go.
Hello, Michelle.
Hi, good evening. Is Karen on? I can't tell whether she's on or not.
She's connected, but muted. Yeah.
Yep, her name is there.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
Karen. Hi.
Yeah, Karen, I don't know if Karen's coming on via phone, so she might not have video.
I do. Let me just.
Okay. Just
Yep.
a slight technical difficulty. Here we
Oh,
go.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, start my video. Yeah.
There you are, Karen.
okay.
Okay. Is
And
that
now
it?
you're gone again.
Gone.
There
There.
you go.
There. Living color. Here we
All
are.
right.
Yes.
Technical.
Okay. So thank you
good.
for having us here tonight. Karen and I both chair the Apple Fest committee with our other committee members. And so we want to thank you for having us here tonight.
Thank you.
So as you know that this Friday, Apple Fest begins. I'm going to probably hold this up, and hopefully the public and everyone has received their Apple Fest guide. If not, it wasn't this weekend, it would be in your mail the beginning of this week, and you can also find it at Lowe's Variety and some other locations in town. Much like last year was all virtual, this year we're coming back. We probably had last year, in 2019 would have been the last time we had this without the fireworks. So the fireworks will be the first time since 2018. We probably had upwards of 32 events. I think counting, we've probably got somewhere in the 24 events. So it's not too bad. We've got, 5 events on Friday, 5 events on Sunday, and then a whole slew of events on Saturday. I would direct the public to the Apple Fest website, which is all on the banners as you drive through our town, which is www.northboroughapplefest.com. It's the best way to go get the most accurate and up-to-date information. We're also posting it throughout social media and the other organizations themselves. We have many organizations who participate in these this weekend to make it happen. We'll also distribute it throughout their organization as it sort of funnels its way out to the community. We have some newer events, but I'll go through a couple events as we go through the days, just to let everybody know. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. We always start our Friday event with our little ones who are, preschoolers with a Mr. Bubble show at Ellsworth McAfee Park. I would say probably 95% of the events are outside, with everyone understanding the social distancing that's required. So we start that. We're hoping that the rain holds off and we don't get any rain on Apple Fest weekend. But at Ellsworth McAfee Park, starting at 10, we'll have Mr. Bubbles. And then everything transitions over to the senior center having a luncheon with their bake-off. That's an annual event that the seniors enjoy. And then the library for 2 days will be having their book sale inside. That'll be just the one inside event is the library book sale. And then the Northborough Ed Foundation will be at Juniper Hills Golf Course having drinks and dancing for the night. So that takes care of Friday, where we have a couple of organizations hosting their events. And I understand that, they're hoping that people will attend and there's probably good attendance. I will say that we're anticipating not as strong of attendance as 2018, where we might expect to have maybe 70 to 80% of attendance. We're hoping that we can get the full attendance, but understanding what's happening around us now, that maybe everyone won't come out, but like I said, almost everything is outside. As we transition into Saturday, Karen should talk a little bit more. Burroughs Cares for Troops, where Karen and I and Leslie Arsenault and Beth Davison are both members of. We're having our annual road race. And Karen, how many runners do we have now?
Right now, we have 192 that are already pre-registered. So that's super exciting for us. We took this over from the Chamber of Commerce a couple of years ago, and this is by far the best turnout we've had so far. And like we said before, we're hoping that the weather holds out and that we have a great weekend. We've also opened it up so they can run virtually if they're not comfortable with being in person. And that actually then opens it up to anyone across the country. So I actually have a few friends from different parts of the country that are running virtually just to support us. So that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And it's
Can people register morning of for that as well?
Yeah. Yes. So the registration online closes at 5 o'clock on the 15th. And then after that, you can register in person. It's $35 per person. That does not include a t-shirt. The pre-registration does, but we have plenty of t-shirts on hand if people want to get them.
Great. Thanks.
We hope to see you there again this year, Jason. Just to let you know, all the right afterwards on Veterans Day, as we had last year, all those wonderful banners recognizing our veterans along Main Street. The proceeds from this event help support a cause like that. So it goes right back into the community, really helping our veterans.
That and our food pantry.
Yeah, and the food pantry that we have that is open twice a month for veterans. So then we also have on the town common for the first time, a farmer's market going on. They're very excited about that. They have 20 vendors. So, and some great vendors. So we ask everyone to consider attending the farmer's market. There's a lot of things going on downtown. So you can park your car, get out and walk, because you can go from one event to the other. From there, you would probably go down to the street fair. And then as Pat indicated, that's, by the way, is not from 7 to 5, but it's from 10 to 4. And then next to that at Trinity Church, they're having another festival themselves. Again, that's from 10 to 4. And then the library is having their book sale. And then on 10 Main Street, they're having Yeoman's Ice Cream and a dance-a-thon. So there's a lot of activities going in downtown Northborough between 10 to 4 that people can get out and walk around and visit. At the same time, down near St. Bernadette's, we have some organizations that moved on down towards that section of town. The police department is starting its first bike rodeo that we haven't had around for a while, and that's for the younger kids. There's 2 start times. The 4 to 6 year olds go from 10 to noon, and the 7 to 11 year olds go to 12 to 2 p.m. And the kids are excited about that, and they learn about bike safety. And if I could just make a plug here, we have a tremendous amount of student volunteers helping us throughout the weekend. So it's very exciting to see a lot of high school students participating and helping out the community groups. And then also at that section of town near St. Bernadette's, the Junior Women's Club, which is very active in our community, is having their annual apple pie cafe. I understand they sell out pretty quickly, so get there early. And then they're also, their first time, their youth ministry is happening at an ice cream social. And then right behind where they're having the bike rodeo, next to Chet's Diner will be open serving from 12 to 3 hamburgers. You can go in and buy yourself a nice lunch or hamburger or a grilled cheese sandwich, or they're having a couple of sandwiches. And it's great because they're opening for the first time. And we're also having a trackless train there. So the young kids who go around there to, do the bike rodeo can come over and take a train ride, and it'll be a lot of fun for them. So those are basically some of the newer events that were actually happening for that Saturday. And then we have the more traditional events like the Art and Bloom has always done by the Northborough Art Guild and the Northborough Garden Club. And the museum will be also open as well at from 12 until 4 p.m. at the Historical Society. So that's, again, people can get up and walk down Main Street, and there's plenty of events to go from, the town common all the way down to the Historical Society. And if they want, they could walk down to St. Bernadette's as well and back. And then most of that wraps up around 4 o'clock, giving our town staff a little bit of a break. And we want to thank the town staff because they do work hard that day, from DPW, police, and fire. And then we move over to the high school. We're able to have our annual fireworks again with a significant amount of community groups, participating in that event. We have, it starts at 5 o'clock, and the fireworks go off between 8 and 8:30. And then we're usually out of there shortly after 9. We have a concert with a local band called Hit the Bus. The Knights of Columbus are going to do their annual barbecue. The robotics team, Algonquin robotics team with the Kids Love Seeing, will be on the tennis courts. We're having a pizza booth. The National Honor Society, a lot of the kids are looking for ways to contribute and get active within the community. So they're taking a significant role. They're helping us out with pony rides, moonwalks, cotton candy, and Boy Scout Troop 1 is going to be doing their monkey bridge, which I understand kids like a lot. And of course, everybody loves Mrs. Griffin, Mrs. Pat Griffin, will be there with her glow-in-the-dark sticks, which most of the kids don't come up and want one until it starts getting darker out. And then she has a line that's a mile long. They don't get it ahead of time. They get it when it gets dark out. So there's a lot of events, and Saturday night, being at the high school is really a great way for the community to come together to support these organizations, support the high school kids are coming out and volunteering. And also, just as the Doyle said, gather together, social distancing, because people haven't seen each other a long time, have some food, and then watch the fireworks. It'll be nice. I also wanted to mention that this year we have a grand marshal who is a former Board of Selectmen, is Don Rand. Dedicated 52 years of service, which is amazing, to the town of Northborough. Just an excellent person, excellent volunteer work she did over the years. Tremendous amount of letters and, endorsing her support as a grand marshal. So Dawn will be at a lot of these events throughout the weekend, and please take the time to thank her for 52 years of service, which is a very long time dedicating to town boards. I don't think anyone appreciates as much work as she had put in over the years. And then we will also be honoring our former Chief of Police, Chief Hutchins, at the fireworks with just a small ceremony with his family, just to thank him for all the work that he did over the years and for the police department and for our community. So that will just be a small 5-10 minute ceremony, but it will be nice for the public to hear about the chief if they never had the opportunity to meet him. And that sort of wraps up Saturday. And then Sunday, we go in, we quiet down that day, and we have the traditional pancake breakfast with Scout Troop 1. And then hopefully, no rain, we'll have the classic car show that Karen is helping to run, right, Karen?
Yeah, well, we're hoping it's going to be a good one, but
Yeah.
the
'Cause they
first
won't
time.
yeah. They won't bring their cars out if we have any type of clouds or drizzle. So,
I don't blame them.
yeah. And we have a couple of other smaller events today. Karen, did you want to talk a little bit about the car show?
Yeah. At the Classic Car Show, we'll also have Craftworks is going to be doing a sidewalk sale. Rockies on Saturday, just to back up a little, is going to do arts and crafts for young kids. No cost to them. They just come down and they have a couple of things that they can have them do. But Craftworks is having a sidewalk sale during the Classic Car Show. We'll also have Jack's Guitar is having his students out there to play music while this is all going on. And then we will also have a food truck down there. They can also get, I think, a couple of slices and a drink for a special from Town Center Pizza. And, everybody's trying to get involved. And it's nice where we can bring in different sections of town that had, maybe not been able to participate because they were just kind of off the beaten path from the center of town. So, and then I just wanted to add in one more thing on Saturday was the chicken barbecue at the American Legion. That is from 4 to 6. They get a half a roasted chicken, ear of corn, baked potato for $12, and tickets can be purchased at the Legion during operating hours or that day.
And I know the proceeds from the chicken dinner goes to their scholarship.
Yes.
Yeah, which is good. Another good thing. And just as an FYI for the Board of Select, we hear this a lot from our businesses where they knew that, traditionally over the years, what is this year? This is our 31st year. So for probably like 25 years, it was all conjugated downtown, and they really wanted it to spread out along Main Street, along Route 20. So we're really happy to see that a lot of things are happening down by St. Bernadette's, where Chet's Diner is, with the police department. It's nice to see activities there, and then activities on the other end where we have more businesses down towards, Northborough Shopping Plaza. A lot of those businesses want to participate as well. So, it's good to see all of that. So if you have any questions.
Yeah, well, I just want to throw in there, I think it's excellent to see that area evolving a little bit, where Rockies is.
Yeah.
It is its own area. It has a bunch of businesses down there. So it's neat that it's not, and no offense to the Classic Car Show, but it's nice that there are other businesses in there that want to take advantage of that time period and do their own thing. And now that we're trying to socially distance a bit, it also will spread out people a little bit. Everybody isn't just concentrated downtown. People will be spread out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Which I think is good. I think that's nice.
Yeah. I also forgot to mention that Metro is painting. There's a sign there. If you go to Davidians, and you tell them that you're part of the pumpkin decorating contest, they will give you at a discount a pumpkin. and you drop off and then prizes are given out. So, and that's another business, Metro West Painting, that's participating in the event. Yeah.
Terrific. Members of the board, any questions? Julianne?
Well, I just want to say, I don't even know how to say thank you for all the work that you all put into it, you and your committee. And, you know, most likely it was even more work this year with the pandemic and trying to figure all of that out. So just thank you very much. And I'll hope for good weather too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Leslie?
Yeah, thank you for everything. I know it's a lot of work, and to be constantly adding new things. And it's not like you're just doing the exact same things every year. You're adding it. You're trying to enhance, attract different age groups, and I think it's wonderful what you're doing. Could you tell us the names of your committee members?
Yep, we have a former Board of Select person, Joanne Sharp. You all probably know her. We have Pat Griffin. We have Cheryl Scally. We have Karen Brewster. We have myself. And then that's about it. Yeah.
A lot of work for what, 5 people?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's done over the course of the year, and it's a different model in the sense that the community groups do a lot of too. We contact and reach them and work with them throughout the year on what they're thinking of doing and how to best advertise their event that's going on too. So a lot of the community groups need to get a lot of recognition as well. And I hope it's successful because these are big, this is probably for a lot of these groups, their #1 fundraiser throughout the year.
And I just want to say that Michelle works tirelessly on this, and the amount of work that she puts into it herself, just for the Apple Fest guide alone, is an immeasurable amount of hours. And I don't think she gets enough recognition for that. So thank you.
It's like my little part-time job when I'm not doing the real estate.
Something on the side to keep you occupied.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you'd be getting into trouble, right,
Yeah,
Michelle?
I actually enjoy it. So
Yeah.
don't worry about it.
Well, I just want to thank both of you again for being here tonight, for all the work that goes into Apple Fest. We certainly appreciate that. We appreciate all the effort that the other volunteers are putting in to support these various events and make it a success. Just one more time, Michelle, could you just mention the URL for the website so people know where to go if they want to get information
Sure,
online?
it's www.northboroughapplefest.com.
Okay, great.
And if they email us or text us with any information, my husband David is constantly updating that website. So,
Terrific. So that's the most up-to-date information. On
most
everything that's
up-to-date
going on.
information, actually, yes.
Terrific. Leslie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just real quickly, this is actually the second time that there'll be a farmer's market on the town common, correct? Because there was one, I think in 2019, 20?
It was the very first year that the town common was open.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
maybe it is, yeah, because they had to go down to 10 Main Street one year, and I don't know why. But either way, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great spot. That's a great
Yeah.
spot.
Now that I think about it, I think we had a tent set up for the master plan steering committee.
Oh, yes,
to
you're
do
right.
an
You're
informational
right.
presentation.
You're right.
Yes,
Yeah, you're right.
an informative farmer's market. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So you're right,
Uh,
second year.
Right. So very good. We thank you both for being here
you.
tonight to provide us with this
Thank you.
update, and we look forward to a successful weekend.
Yeah. Hope
Thank
to
you.
See you all there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Good night.
Good night.
And next up on the agenda is reports. We'll begin with Julianne Hirsch.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first thing I'd like to mention is that the Cultural Council has been working very hard because the grant cycle has begun, and they will be accepting grants until Friday, October 15th. I noticed today in town that they have some information even up on the Lions Club sign. So, and if you have any trouble, if anyone is interested in doing it and have any trouble finding their information online, you can contact me and I can get you in touch with them. I attended a CMRPC meeting where they talked about planning for 2050. The project is called Imagine 2050, and they'll be looking at things like which is their usual goal, which is looking at population growth, infrastructure, and the economy and things like that. So we'll be getting a lot of good information from them. And just another reminder that the Community Preservation Committee is accepting applications until November 4th. And lastly, the Master Plan Implementation Committee met, and it was really an introductory meeting where we got to know each other, elected our officers, and had a presentation from the consultant. So please look forward to some a schedule of meetings that will be approximately monthly, and we're off and running. So that ends my report. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Julianne. Scott Rogers.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Just wanted to thank the chiefs for their monthly reports. It was good to see on the police side that one of our newest members, Awa, was nearing completion on training, and then that the offers are out for some open positions there. On the fire report, congratulations to Captain McManus on his promotion, and firefighter medic Raposa on the swearing in that occurred. Chief, I don't know if you want to just say a quick word about the grant for the radio replacements.
Sure. So as we've done since we've been here, I've been here 5.5 years, and we've been able to identify something we need, put it on the CIP, and start applying for grants for it. And it normally takes about 3 years, and just before it comes due, we get lucky. Last one was a self-contained breathing apparatus for 300,000. This one, we identified the need for new portable radios. Now, a single portable radio is about $8,000, at least the ones that we buy, because they're multi-band and they do all kinds of funky stuff. Again, third year, $230,000 we were awarded a grant. Incredibly happy. It was Mike Borwick's a goodbye present to us, because he's the last, he wrote, that was his final grant he wrote. And just so you know, the day it came in, I forwarded it to Mike Parr. I said, Mike, take over. And Mike has hit the ground running, and he's already ordered the radios. So we are so excited to be moving forward with those. These radios increase our capability and allow each individual firefighter to have his own portable radio. So when they're in the building, they're able to, if there's a mayday, if there's something, if there's a big problem, they can get out get out. And more importantly, these are multi-band radios. So if you know anything about the fire service and interoperability, we've been trying to get things straight since 9/11, and we still haven't done it. And we have, for instance, just in our area, we run on VHF. Westborough runs on UHF. Marlborough runs on 800. State Police run on 700. And then interop is all over the place. So these new radios will function on all of those bands. All we have to do is flip the channel, and it is amazing what they've done. But that's why they're $8,000. But we're so excited about having it, and hopefully they'll be in and programmed in service fairly soon.
That's great. So congratulations on
Thank you.
that grant. Yeah, $230,000. Wow.
Yeah.
And always in the reports are great to see the feedback from residents as one of the members of the team has provided great service. And then as the Doyles mentioned, we had a few tragedies over the last couple of weeks, and our thoughts and best wishes go out to the impacted families and responders. Last week, meeting of the Parks and Rec Commission, I want to give kudos to Allie Lane and her team for a very successful summer program. Despite staffing shortages and COVID-19 precautions, she reports in a fabulous feedback from the kids and other residents that are participated in those programs. As part of that meeting, just a quick reminder, there's been a couple of incidents at Ellsworth McAfee Park. We've had some bicycle collisions with people on the walking path. So a reminder that bicycles are not allowed on that walking path around Ellsworth McAfee. We want to keep the walkers safe and not being hit by bicycles. Finally, I did attend a webinar of state and local officials on vaccines and variants with Dr. Leanna Nguyen. That was informative, giving some good information to folks across the country of what's happening with COVID-19, all of which we've heard from Kristen, our health agent, in the past, but it was good to see that expanded kind of national perspective and see questions coming in from mayors and town officials from across the country. Jason, Leslie, I hope you've got in your reports a little bit about Purple Heart and 9/11 ceremony. So I'll conclude my report there and hand the baton over.
All right, thank you very much, Scott. Leslie.
Okay. Yes, thank you to both police and fire chiefs for their reports. Always interesting to read, to see all the detail. And it's one of those things that makes you really appreciate all the work that goes on in your departments. So thank you very much for those. I attended a local production of Our Town on the town common. It was the first time that the town common had been used for that purpose. And this production was put on by the Yorick Ensemble, which is run by Josh Telework, who is a 2013 graduate of Algonquin, who then went on to Emerson and earned a theater degree. And just absolutely terrific, absolutely terrific. He was in high school. He's the same age as my youngest. And I know how talented he is, and he put on a great show and really quite moving, pretty much in tears by the end of it. But it was really just wonderfully done, and the way that he arranged the set to use the pergola, and he had extra lighting out there. It's just very, very, very nicely done. And I can't thank him enough for wanting to do that here and showing residents what it's like to use the town common in that way. So I want to thank him very much for that. I attended the K-8 school committee meeting on September 1st. It was interesting to listen to each of the principals speak about the first day of school. They all had a great experience. They're all positive people anyway, but they were really talking about how well everything had gone and how happy everyone was to be back at school. There were a few issues, I think, with buses. I think that some things needed to be ironed out in terms of numbers, realizing that oftentimes on the first day of school, kids and parents want their kids to ride the buses just to see what the bus is like, know what the bus route is. And then they end up sometimes going another way to school. So the buses don't always end up as crowded. So I think there's some issues that will be ironed out. But everything seemed to have gone very, very well. I attended a Purple Heart town designation ceremony at the 135 fields. And I do want to thank Veterans District Veterans Agent Justin Souza for his work in putting this together. Former Representative Harold Naughton was there as well, and he stepped up and just spoke so beautifully at that event. And I think he's a perfect person to do that. He's a veteran himself. He knows the communities here and knows the significance of this designation. And according to Justin Souza, there will be, I believe, 7 signs placed around town at various locations to show that we are a designated Purple Heart community. So it was very, very nice. Danielle Gregoire was there, and I want to thank Burroughs Cares for Troops, the American Legion, Fire Department, Police Department, DPW was there. I saw Robo. There's a lot of people there. It was nice to have representation throughout the community for this. It's really quite a big deal, and I want to thank Leslie and Dan Arsenal were there as well. And I attended a very meaningful 9/11 ceremony at the fire department on Saturday morning. Very, very beautifully done. Chief Parenti, you really spoke so well about what this really means to all of us on the 20th anniversary of this. It was a very heartfelt sentiment, and many members of your department were there. One rang the bell toward the end of the ceremony, which was really very moving. We had a couple of police officers there as well. And Lorraine Kane, of course, and then John and Jason and I were there. And there was a nice man and his little boy who I'm not sure they were aware initially of that event, but maybe they were somewhere else in town and happened to see the gathering. But I was impressed because that little boy, who looked to be maybe 8, stood so respectfully and did not move throughout the entire thing. I think even he realizes the importance of it. So it was really a very, very nice event. And the fire chaplain, Dick Martino, also spoke very sincerely and very upfront about what his thoughts were on it, and the fact that I believe he lost his sense of smell, I believe.
Yes, he worked a pile. He was down there for quite a while helping out, and
Yeah.
he lost his sense of smell after that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's never returned. So there's just, you think about all the ill effects of all this and how many people it affected. But as I think you mentioned, Chief, one nice thing to focus on is the fact that 20,000 people were rescued.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
we always focus on the deaths, which is important, but we got to remember what an incredible job all those men and women did and got 20,000 people out of those towers.
yes. So thank you very much, Chief, for putting that together. I think that
Certainly.
was terrific, and I hope I didn't leave anyone out from that, but it was really, really a very special event. I want to thank you very much for that. And also, just with all the events of last week and the incidents, I should say, I don't think anybody can really thank you and your department enough, and the police department, for all the work that went on. And it's obviously a very emotional kind of a thing too, to have fatalities in our community like that. So it really touches everybody in a different way, whether you're somebody walking by, whether you're working on it. It's just so much to consider. So I want to thank you very, very much. And I want to pass my condolences on to the family and friends of the victims. So that ends my report.
Thank you very much, Leslie. For my report, I'll just briefly echo the sentiments that Leslie just expressed. I was in attendance at the Purple Heart dedication ceremony at Ellsworth McAfee, along with Leslie and John, and just a very nice brief ceremony, but certainly very appropriate. And we certainly thank Veterans Agent Justin Souza for the work he did to try to assemble that and put that together. And as Leslie mentioned, we'll have signs posted at all of the major incoming roadways into town to identify Northborough as a Purple Heart community, and honoring those veterans who were wounded in action to earn that acknowledgement. Similarly, at the 9/11 observance last Saturday at the fire department, I'll just again echo Chief Parenti and Chaplain Martino, both speaking very eloquently to kind of commemorate the significance of the event and offer some, personal stories relating to that kind of make it more immediate and more readily felt. I also wanted to mention Captain Fred Hurst, who put together just a kind of a symbolic set of turnout gear, helmet, coat, and boots at the base of the flagpole to symbolize those who were lost in the event of 9/11. Also like to mention August 31st, as I think Leslie mentioned, or I'm sorry, Scott mentioned, ceremony at the Northborough Fire Department to swear in new firefighter Eric Raposa joining the department, and also for the promotion of now Captain Pat McManus, a well-earned promotion. We congratulate both of them. Assistant Town Clerk Karen Wilbur was there to administer the oaths for those two. So very nice ceremony. The families were in attendance, and certainly the kind of thing we would normally do at one of our meetings in this remote meeting environment, not something we can really accommodate very well. And it was just very nice to be there in person for that one as well.
We really appreciated. We appreciated you and Leslie and everyone else that was there. It was just nice to see you all.
Great. Just make note that this past September 4th was the 7th anniversary of the loss of Brian Arsenal in Afghanistan. He was killed in action in 2014. So each year at our meeting here, we just try to make mention of that observance and just give our regards to the family. Brian was certainly well-liked citizen of the town, had many ties, active at Concord Regional High School, and in the service of his country, lost his life. So I just want to make note of that. And then finally, as others have mentioned this evening, a lot of events over the past couple of weeks, which have placed demands on our public safety services and unfortunately resulted in a couple of fatalities. We certainly offer our condolences to the families who were affected and our thanks for the public responders who had to arrive at those events and do the best they could under the circumstances. So that concludes my report. John, anything you'd like to add?
No report this evening, sir.
Very good. This brings us to public comment. Let me make note, this time 2 weeks ago at our, 2 or 3 weeks ago at our August 23rd meeting, we had an item on the agenda that concerned traffic and safety. And under that agenda item, we took some comment about that specific item. And then subsequently going into general public comment, I first asked for input from anyone who had want to offer something on other topics other than traffic safety, and mentioned that I would come back for comment regarding traffic. And I did not. At the end of the non-traffic comments, there were no more hands raised. I think we were maybe 3 hours into our 4-hour meeting and proceeded along. So I just want to apologize to the people who have been waiting. They did submit their questions by email and the town staff has tried to respond to those. But the error was mine. For public comment, if you wish to speak for public comment this evening, you can raise your hand. At the moment, the only attendees I see are connected through the Zoom webinar. So they're raising their hands even as I speak. And when we bring you in for public comment, we'll ask you to first state your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes to present your concern. As we typically say, anything raised during public comment is not a topic that the board will engage with or deliberate on to any depth. We'll take it under advisement. If there's a simple question that town staff can provide an immediate answer to, then we will strive to do that. And we also ask, of course, that everyone conduct themselves in a respectful and diplomatic manner in presenting their concerns. So with that, let me begin. And our first commenter will be Laura Zeiton. So Laura, I'm bringing you in.
Thank you. Laura Zeiton, 17 Franklin Circle. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Laura.
Great. This is just a comment about the topic that's coming up for the CARES Act and talking about the money that will be coming to Northborough. I was just going to ask if you could consider either doing a survey. I've noticed some of the towns around us have been reaching out to the public for their suggestions on how they'd like that money spent. And I was hoping that would be something you could take under consideration. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Lisa Maselli. Bringing you in, Lisa. Hello, Lisa. You're muted, Lisa.
I was muted. What? Good evening, Jason. This is Lisa Maselli, 13 Maple Street. Hard to believe I was muted, my own reasons. Okay, I'm calling because my ever-present concerns about our municipal properties. The first one of which, of course, is at 167 Main Street, which is the White Cliffs. On the warrant to 2016, we put aside $2,400,000 for the purpose of acquiring and preserving the 6.5 acres of land and building. And it's looking pretty derelict at this point. After the last 5 years, the rains that we have had, I would like the Board of Selectmen actually to take a walk through and all five look at the building interior and see just what shape it might be in, because I know my house has had some problems, especially with this last bit of rains that we've been having. And part of the charge was to preserve the building, and I really think we need to continue doing that if we expect to be able to use it later down the road. The second is 4 West Main Street, which was the old town hall. We did set aside money to do a research on that as well. And again, I'd love to see a tour for the 5 selectmen to go through that and take a look at that building sooner than later, since it's coming up for ownership. And the third would be Church Street, 13 Church Street, the old fire station. And I'm checking to see if that RFP has finally come to a point of importance that it might be finished. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa. Any comment about any of those things, or we will proceed?
You can proceed. Just on the old fire station, Beck and I actually met this afternoon, so that RFP is in the works. We've got a number of RFPs right now that are out on the street, and we're working through a pretty significant backlog. So, but we are getting to everything.
Thank you, John. If there is no more public comment, and I do not see any more hands raised, and that will conclude public comment. Thank you all for your input. Next up is new business. First item is the CARES Act and American Rescue Plan Act update. John, would you like to start us off? And we'll
yeah, let me
to
set the
Finance
table
Director
here.
Jason Little momentarily. Right.
Sure. So we're in a very busy part of the cycle right now. As you well know, we completed fiscal 21. So that fiscal year closed out on June 30th. So we're still closing the books on that. We've begun fiscal 2022 in terms of our budgeting process. And we're actually beginning the planning process for fiscal 2023, which will begin in the next month. We'll start with capital planning and then move into budget preparations. Now, our normal procedure is, we are looking at getting those data points as we prepare to have our annual financial trend monitoring meeting, which is typically done in December. That's usually the kickoff for our budget process. In the midst of all this, we have the pandemic, we have the Delta variant, we've got clinics, vaccine schedules. So it's been a very busy and administratively a little bit overwhelming, frankly, in terms of some of the assistance. It's been great to get assistance from the federal government, the state government, and Jason Little, our finance director, is here in a moment. He's going to speak to sort of the status of some of those. But we have the CARES Act funding that came through the state. We have federal emergency management resources that have been brought to bear, and more recently, the American Rescue Plan Act that has brought additional resources. But we are still in the midst of trying to finalize and get through the CARES Act. And with all of this funding comes advisories, reporting and tracking, and it seems like, and I'm sure Jason will speak to this in a moment, a never-ending alteration to guidances and processes that we need to follow. So it's been very busy. We're sort of in a thick right now of the CARES Act and the FEMA reimbursement submissions. So I do know that a request was made to kind of give a brief update in terms of where we are. And so in your packet is a memo from Jason Little updating you on the CARES Act, the FEMA reimbursement, and giving some basic information with regard to the ARPA funding, which is really just getting going, and we're just starting to get some of the guidance that we've been waiting for and looking for, and that will continue to come out. So it's going to be a long cycle, and these different programs are intertwined and overlapping, so causing quite a bit of additional work, and to some extent, some I don't want to say confusion, but a lot of work to try to tease this stuff out so that we can make sense of what's required of us and how these resources can be spent efficiently and effectively. So with that, I'll hand it over to Jason Little, Finance Director, kind of walk you through his update memo, and then we can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, John. Jason, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, John. Well, first of all, I really struggled to keep this memo down to just 3 pages, and it really only addresses 3 of our COVID grants. And throughout this process, I mean, I've kind of lost count of the smaller number of COVID-related grants we've received. I think we're up to over a dozen different grants. But anyway, I chose to write this memo to update you on the most significant on the town side, which are, as John mentioned, the CARES Act, the FEMA Public Assistance, and ARPA. Those 3 grants are the most significant on the town side, and that's really what the bulk of our time has been spent working on. John said intertwined and overlapping. I would add they're also interdependent and interrelated with each other too. So I'll add that. So again, like I said, I struggled to keep this memo down to 3 pages with the complexity of some of these, given that they're administered by different administrations and there's different reporting and different rules for all these grants. So starting with the CARES Act, we call it the CVRF-MP, which stands for Coronavirus Relief Fund Municipal Program. And that's the $1.3 million that was set aside from the CARES Act and created by the Federal CARES Act and allocated to us on a per capita basis by the state. So we were given this early in the process, this allocation of $1.3 million to address needs created by the coronavirus and to respond to the emergency directly. When this program started out, it started out as what's called a drawdown program. So we were able to request a certain amount in advance of actually spending any money. And early on, we requested $701,000 of the $1.3 million allocation that is set aside for us. So we received this money. Later on, this program was set to expire December of 2020. It was since extended when the pandemic was lengthened in duration. So this legislatively got extended out to December 31st, 2021. While the state is the recipient of these funds, they've put additional restrictions on it where they want to reallocate whatever's left. So we really have a hard deadline of October 29th, 2021 to apply funding from this source. So again, that's a hard deadline set by the state. And over the course of this program as well, we're introduced the concept of the FEMA Public Assistance Program, where typically this is where FEMA comes in and they're interrelated. Over the course of the CARES Act, there was a number of different sets of guidance released by FEMA, whereby certain expenses that we intended to charge to the CARES Act were actually became eligible to be charged to the FEMA Public Assistance Program. And taking a step back, I should mention that part of receiving the CARES Act was a guarantee that we were going to exhaust any other federal source that was existing at the time before applying funds to the CARES Act. So we do have a responsibility to, we don't really have the choice of taking FEMA eligible costs and applying them to the CARES Act by choice. It's really a result of an agreement we've signed with the state that we would exhaust any other federal source that's available. And that's how these 2 grants are so intimately intertwined with each other. So going forward, there's been a number of changes in the guidance for the FEMA Public Assistance Program. We've put one set of claims into the federal government, and those are currently still being worked on. These was expenses that were through September of 2020. We're now September 2021, and we're still kind of waiting for that process to come to completion, where they are reviewing our costs closely that we submitted. And really, those were just the beginning of our costs. So again, what have we submitted so far for expenses? You know, again, we drew down $701,000 from the CARES Act, and we have another 600 available. Will we have direct expenses that amount to 1.3 million? It does not seem likely that we will. To date, we've expended about $500,000 so far, and those costs are those categories are kind of laid out in the memo to you. The most significant one so far is accelerated telework, and this is the money that we've put into network infrastructure, computers, laptops, webcams, the Zoom license we're working on right now, and you know, we've spent about $250,000 so far through those upgrades and other teleworking related technology upgrades to our systems here, so that we could respond to the public and conduct business remotely. The second most expensive expense has been COVID testing for staff and students at the schools. Now, again, this is where it's interrelated with FEMA, and a lot of the testing costs are going to be covered 100% by FEMA. But what has the testing that's elapsed up to January of 2021 has amounted to about $114,000 so far. So those two are by far the largest and most significant costs that we are intending to charge to the CARES Act. Now, going forward with FEMA, we do have charged approximately $43,000 to that we anticipate getting 100% reimbursement back so far. And I know there's the memo mentions that we have some unpaid expenses, and it's on my desk now behind me, and I'm not going to show you what a mess my desk is, but there's a bill from the schools for approximately $100,000 that we owe them for additional testing through June 30th that we will be applying to this FEMA grant. We also have to break down our FEMA expenses by cost category. Some of those other categories are vaccination clinics that we ran this year at the senior center, and the regional one that we took part in and drove. You know, so far, you know, with those two clinic expenses amount to about $120,000, and it's a little unclear how much of that will be reimbursable, given that we build private insurance and we're waiting for insurance money to come in before the federal government isn't going to allow us to collect both private insurance and federal reimbursement. So there's a bit of an unknown there with how much we're going to get reimbursed, but we expect we will be made whole for those costs. And lastly, I mentioned the October 29th deadline that we have for applying for expenses. This makes this a little difficult. Like, as I mentioned, FEMA and CARES are intertwined with each other, and we have claims outstanding with FEMA right now. Those denials, like once we know what's denied from our FEMA claims, we would apply that to CARES ideally. But again, with the time frame of October 29th, it may be unclear, and the state's intention is for us to move any direct expenses related to responding to the pandemic and the emergency to our ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, and that's what ARPA stands for. So lastly, I'll just say that it's not, we have a long window of time to make decisions with the American Rescue Plan Act. And as I said, we're working through the direct costs that we've incurred as a result of the pandemic. And as we go forward, the more long-lasting expenses will have to be considered when we go through that process. But as it stands, I mean, the town is set to receive $4.5 million in total from the American Rescue Plan Act money that's allocated to us. And at this point, the town has received 50% of that money and will receive the other 50%, regardless of whether we spend any of it yet within the next year. The timeline for expenditure of those funds is through December 31st, 2024. So again, there's a longer window of time that's available to decide what to do with those funds. And I think I covered everything from the memo. If you have any questions, I'll be here to answer any.
Thank you very much, Jason. John, did you have anything else you'd want to supplement that with?
Just in terms of the ARPA funding, there's guidelines about how this funding can be used. And obviously it can be used to support any urgent COVID-19 related responses. But one of the factors, and we gave you in your packet a brief, I believe, from Administration and Finance, that one of the things that's different between the CARES Act funding. CARES Act funding could only be used for immediate direct COVID-related response. And that was it. And you've heard me say many times that money came in. We were dying. I felt like I was dying of thirst, but couldn't access the money for what we needed. One of the things that the CARES Act money is explicitly prohibited from being used for is revenue replacement. And so what happened during the pandemic? Well, our revenues dropped off. Our motor vehicle excise, our hotel, our meals tax, everything dropped off significantly. And so we had to make some decisions at town meeting about what we were going to cut. And we postponed capital investment. We postponed OPEB trust fund investments to the tune of $1 million over 2 years. And we cut money out of various budget lines to basically bring that budget together. That was a fiscal 21 budget. But what's different about ARPA is the American Rescue Plan Act funding, as Jason said, is a much longer horizon, multiple years that it can be used over. And the thing that is the biggest differentiation between prior federal aid, in my opinion, is that it can be used to replace lost revenues. And so there's a formula by which it would go, you have to follow. And this is one of the things that when I said we're still waiting for additional guidance and information, there are a lot of outstanding questions about what exactly is considered a revenue between the federal government, the state government, and us. And we're working through, think about like a lot of what we lost were we lost some enterprise fund, but we lost revolving fund, our recreation department, our senior center meals program. Those aren't considered revenues for purposes of this. So the formula, and we gave you the guidance so you can kind of see the type of materials that we're dealing with in terms of trying to figure out how to use these funds. But basically there is a formula, and we're working our way through that. And the best approach we believe would be to look at that. And we believe, at least on a preliminary basis, that revenue replacement formula would be sufficient, that we lost enough revenues that this funding can come in and serve as just another general revenue replacement for us, which is what it was intended to do. And then again, we have existing plans, we have existing procedures, we have a capital plan, we have a master plan implementation committee and a master plan. We have a budget process. And so most of those revenues, we believe, would flow through that process. Obviously, the things that we don't know, there's still a lot of unknowns right now. And once the door closes on FEMA and the CARES Act, that means if we get into another hotspot in terms of the pandemic, if things get heated up again, we're probably looking at clinics. We're probably looking at clinics anyway. All the things that we just went through, there's always the possibility that we might see that stuff cycle through again. So there needs to be sufficient contingency planning around that as well. I guess if you take nothing else away from this discussion is it's very complicated. We need to put the CARES Act and the FEMA money to bed so that we know what they aren't going to cover that will roll forward. And this will need to be taken up in a time frame that is related to our normal procedures for budget development. So we're figuring that most of this information will start to flush out. We'll get the CARES Act and the FEMA behind us. We'll get more information regarding the ARPA funding, its allowed uses, and its revenue replacement formula. And I would anticipate us having a much more lengthy discussion, probably around the December timeframe, as we start to collect all of our other data and go through the analysis to prepare for the financial trend monitoring and really the financial forecast. I think we need to know where we wound up in fiscal 21. We need to see where our revenues are going. That is a little bit clouded given what's happening with the Delta variant and some of the other impacts on the government, on the operations. And also we have now the ARPA funding. So this stuff all needs to be put into a financial context for us to consider how best to use it. But essentially, think about this. 70% of our budget is school department. This is a general revenue replacement, and we need to think about first and foremost. We got through the pandemic by cutting capital and basically putting off some unfunded liabilities. Those should be primary discussions about how do we get back on track in terms of the capital investment as well as the unfunded liabilities. So, but all this stuff needs to be put into context, and we just don't have that context at the moment. And so it's premature, in my opinion, based on where we are in these cycles, to get into too much discussion about it. There'll be plenty of time to have these discussions through the normal process. But again, we're waiting, and we're going to need some more information. To say that we're inundated with information is a understatement. We're getting blasted with information, 150-page guides about the process and how to go about reimbursement. It's going to be challenging, but we need to start putting some data points and some things to bed, like the prior fiscal year, the CARES Act, the FEMA, so we have a sense in the lay of the land. And I think that's the biggest thing that we feel is missing at the moment from any further discussions is that context. And we're not going to have that for a couple of months. The good news is, as Jason said, this funding source is unlike the CARES Act or FEMA, doesn't have a tight time frame on it. So there's a chance to give some thoughtful planning to these funds, because again, as helpful as they are going to be one-time revenues. And so we need to be very careful how we use them. We do have policies, financial policies about how we use one-time revenues. And we have a lot of planning tools like the capital improvement plan and the master plan about what our priorities are. And so whatever we do should fall in line with those planning tools that are in place. You will see, it was mentioned, some communities having listening station sessions and so forth. One of the reasons why you're seeing that is you're seeing that in the larger communities. You're seeing it typically in the cities, and you're seeing it in places that have mayors, frankly. But a big one piece of the ARPA funding, one of the things that they are very heavily focused on is making sure that the communities that were hardest hit by the pandemic are being addressed. And so you talk about low income and socially vulnerable communities, communities with high rates of poverty, homelessness, high poverty school districts. There's a qualified census tract, which is low income areas that are identified. And so those are the communities that are reaching out to those segments of their community and population to talk about what special and immediate needs they may have. And so that's what you're seeing happening in the big cities and some of the in some of the cities at the moment. Towns our size are pretty much in the same position we are, which is we're trying to get through this very elaborate, convoluted process for reimbursement, not knowing we submit for everything, right? We don't know what's going to get rejected. And some will get rejected from FEMA. We know that already. That will be applied to CARES. If it gets rejected from CARES, we may need to talk about using ARPA funding. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. We need to have a little bit more of the financial context fall in line for us, and then be looking at the fall for maybe some more in-depth discussions about where things shake out. I think the biggest unknown for us right now is just what's happening. You know, what does the Delta variant mean? We have 50% of our caseload right now are breakthrough cases, people that are currently fully vaccinated but still contracting COVID. We also have clinics that we know or believe are coming for the younger children. We have talk of booster clinics. And I will say this, at your meeting 2 weeks ago, I believe Kristen Black, our health agent, commented, DPH has no intentions right now of running any clinics or doing any of this. So their overtures are, well, you have ARPA funding, so you guys are going to be able to, you need to handle all this stuff. So we just don't know what's going to happen. So we want to be conservative and we want to take a measured approach, and we need information and context in which to make informed decisions. And we just don't have that at the moment, but that will start to come over the next couple of months. And I believe it will come in the time frame and the process for our normal public budgeting process. So I would see us having some more information and setting the table, like I said, in December when we do our financial trend monitoring. That's when we look back. How did our revenue projection, how did our revenues actually do? Because we don't really know what's happening. We have the data, but we don't know where it's going, right? Because we don't know what's happening in terms of the pandemic. And then we need to forecast out to see where we're going to be in, for the next 5 years, and start identifying the gaps and the needs and how the resources that we have, how our actual recurring revenues and these one-time revenues can come to bear to make sure that we're covering all the patches and all the gaps and what we may need to do. Even testing, we spent the lion's share of our CARES Act money on testing in the schools. Now the state has rolled out a program, and the schools are moving and transitioning to that testing program. If that doesn't work out, we may need to go back to our own testing. So those are discussions that I've been having with the superintendent. A lot of unknowns, I guess, is the bottom line. So we need more context, we need more information, and the positive thing is we don't need to make any decisions immediately. As more guidance comes forward, we have more of our own local financial context and needs, what the school department's facing, what public safety is facing. We can have those discussions moving forward. But honestly, sitting here today, we're just trying to get through the reimbursement process for the rather arduous past year or so that we've gone through with clinics and expenses and protecting the public and all that. We're still mopping up after that before we can pivot and really start looking at the upcoming fiscal 2023 budget. The only other thing I would mention to you, there are some other unknowns, probably the most significant of which, particularly for our older more board members, is Fallon, our health insurance carrier, is dropping all private or all public business. So all of our employees are in Fallon. That's our insurance carrier. They're going away. So we are right now, somebody mentioned, like, when are we going to get to, RFPs for surplusing small pieces of property? Yeah, that's important. But having bidding out in the RFP process for our health insurance is arguably the top financial priority that we have right now, because the numbers that we're looking at, we could be looking at health insurance coming in at 10 or 12%. That could be $500,000. That's almost what we would get for a typical 3.5% for all the non-school departments in total. So there are a lot of moving pieces, as there always are. So the good news is we have these revenues as a source. That's great. Bad news is we're going to have a lot of needs, and there's still a lot of unknowns. And so we need to start filling in those gaps, as I said, and we'll get there through the normal process. But we need time to work through what we have on our plate with these reimbursements right now, in order to give you any realistic contextual financial information upon which to start having informed decisions. Otherwise, we're just talking to talk. You need that context. So with that, I'm sure we'll be happy to answer any questions that any board members may have.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, John. Appreciate the information presented. Questions? Leslie, I see you.
Yes.
Hand. Yep.
Thank you. It sounds complicated enough, Jason, that it's too bad we don't have just a conduit that we can submit expenses through and then let them figure out which act it falls under. I mean, this is just crazy, you know, like you said, overlapping and intermingled and intertwined, and, you know, reimburse versus drawing down is just a lot to have to worry about. So thank you very much for all that information. A couple of quick questions. There was a line item for social distancing measures. I assume that means things like floor and pavement markings and plexiglass. Is that what that is?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Primarily plexiglass and signage for the buildings.
Okay.
And some smaller capital improvements, like we affectionately refer to them as the ice cream windows. Now, you're not allowed to get into the office. We do business through a little sliding plexiglass door, even though everybody has masks on. You know, we put that in, and we were hoping, frankly, that we wouldn't have to use them, but we're using them right now today.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, those are great. And one question, under ARPA, there was a portion that I had written down saying support stabilization for households and businesses. How do you define that? What does that mean exactly?
well, that's one of the things that we're looking to work through. You know, ARPA came through and was being approved at a time where, you know, we weren't really sure what was happening with the pandemic and how bad that crisis was. And then next thing you know, we're all taking our masks off and going out to dinner thinking everything is over or better. So that allows us to do things like, if we had food insecurities, if we had housing issues, you know, to address those types of things. You know, one of the things that one of the positive things about Northborough and how we basically made it through this pandemic was, you know, if you look around, there was a lot of pain spread out across the community, but we didn't lose a lot of businesses. You know, a couple transitions that took place, but we didn't lose a lot of businesses. We didn't have food insecurity issues here. You know, we had a community meals program, but when we dug down into the numbers, what we found was the numbers were up, but we were serving people from other communities, which was great. Mm-hmm. We know that we called every senior in town 3 times, mm-hmm. and through making thousands of phone calls over multiple months, what did we find out? We connected with 2, maybe 3 folks that we, you know, might have needed a little extra assistance. So we don't have, you know, we're not a census tract. You know, we don't have a census tract here of poverty. We don't have pockets of poverty. We don't have homelessness issues. We don't have a lot of those types of things. But if we did, this would be a funding source to address those. So, but as we know from what we just went through, though, again, you know, Northborough is a fairly well-off community. Doesn't mean, you know, people weren't impacted, and some people weren't impacted significantly. But what we found was, through continuous outreach, that we had the resources to help those folks. If somebody lost housing, you know, the state had a multi-million-dollar housing rental program, and we were able to work with people and get them through that. As you know, we paired up with the Chamber of Commerce, getting people to the Paycheck Protection Program and all the small business loans and things of that nature. But nothing in our community rose to the level where it would make sense for us, like the city of Worcester, to put together a program that's going to serve, you know, thousands of people. Just the administrative setup and overhead doesn't make sense for us. And again, luckily we were we were a fairly well-off community that we were able to take care of the people who needed to be taken care of. But again, if that becomes an issue, or we identify that as an issue, these funding resources could be used to address that.
Okay.
If you remember, like we got through that, we kept asking the food pantry, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Do you need funding?" And at the end of it, they donated $10,000 to the community meals program up at the senior center. So again, we're fortunate, and in this community, people came together and took care of helping each other out, and things, we weathered the pandemic better than most. So.
And just one other quick question. Jason, you said that we're waiting for the memo said we're awaiting reimbursement for school testing and clinic insurance.
Through the chair, there's a little bit of complication with our claims for our vaccination clinics. Before we get reimbursed from the federal government, we need to have our hands around what we're getting reimbursed from private insurance, because through those two vaccination programs, the regional clinic and the local clinic, we build people's private insurance. And I don't know if I was clear about it, but the federal government will not allow us to collect both on behalf of the town. So we need to, if we get any insurance reimbursements, that needs to be backed off of our FEMA claims, and we need to know what those what's been billed and what's been improved by insurance and what we're going to collect from the insurance companies. So again, it adds a little bit of a degree of complexity with those particular claims.
And let's add another layer to it. We did the clinics with 7 other communities, so it's going to take a lot of administrative work to get through this process. It's put a very significant burden on Jason, in particular, in his office. We do have engaged some consultants to help us get through navigate some of the administrative pieces of it. But the bottom line is, we still need to touch each piece of paper because we need to make sure that it qualifies. We need to make sure that we've authorized it, and we need to make sure that we know which bucket it's being charged to. So while the administrative, the consultant helping is marginally helpful, it's not as helpful as you would think, frankly.
Well, Jason, thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
I know you've been busy.
If I could just piggyback onto that a little bit, you're saying we need to know what the response effectively is going to be from the private insurance carriers before we turn around and make claims for whatever is not covered. What's the time frame for that to happen? I mean, I don't know.
It's even better than
insurance
that.
Carriers that are all that.
They just decide what they're going to pay. So there's no rhyme, and there's some of them are trickling in, other coming in batches. It's a complication for sure.
Is it the case that we could get reimbursed from these other government things and then potentially have to refund some of that if some late breaking insurance payments from the private carriers come to us?
That is a possibility, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Nobody can tell us how this is supposed to work because they're figuring, I mean, look, in the middle of a pandemic and a crisis, all these great programs are put in place, and a lot of them were put in place with very general, broad language, okay, to address the COVID response to COVID. Okay, now get into the detail. What exactly is that, and what is eligible? And so it's just a constant back and forth, frequently asked questions, getting guidance, then specifically, will this be covered? But the piece about the health insurance reimbursements, that's, we're gonna have to see how that plays out.
Okay. Scott Rogers, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Question to Jason, just a kind of a technical bit, I guess. In the memo, you had the dates that both the CARES Act and FEMA public assistance ended. And then for ARPA, how long back does it look in terms of eligibility? How far back in time can we reach to use those funds?
That it would The beginning of it, I believe, goes back to the beginning of the pandemic. The ones at the beginning of the pandemic, I think all those claims will be covered sufficiently. So again, that really wasn't a concern of anybody internally of covering things from the beginning of the pandemic, which is probably goes back to January of 2020, I believe. You know, some of these. You know, they expanded out the beginning period because I think some other jurisdictions had some expenses that predated the you know, our disaster declaration, I think, was March 17th, 2020. But so generally all of our expenses came after that date. And I would just add, I don't want to get in the weeds with the FEMA claims, but we did have a change of personnel on the within FEMA that we were dealing with, and the new people that came in weren't all that thrilled with the way that the decisions were made with how the arrangement with the regional vaccination clinics got set up. And I don't know, we're getting a little bit of slow answers from them on some of the questions, you know, going back to our initial claim.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You can ask the same question to 4 different state or FEMA officials, and you will get 4 slightly different answers. So we're gonna have to go through the formal process, submit, and you know, what qualifies, what doesn't, we'll have to move to the next grant, and it'll keep rolling down. So that's probably the biggest thing, is finding out where we actually ultimately wind up with these reimbursements, and how much, if any, of the ARPA funding will be needed to bolster those prior expenses. Again, it's complicated, but I just say the positive thing is we have these resources. We just need to be careful that this isn't just let's just, you know, throw it out there and see how people want to spend the money. There has to be context. There has to be financial information in which to be able to make an informed decision, because it's going to have significant repercussions. These are one-time revenues flowing through our system, and we need to make sure that we don't misstep, spend money that we need to reimburse for something else that got denied, or turns out that Delta variant and whatever variant comes behind it is heating up again, and you know, we're back to clinics, and we just don't know. So we need to be careful how we proceed, and managing expectations about what this money is for and how it can be used and what it means. And that's why you don't want to have discussions without context. That's why we don't start throwing out budget numbers, right, until we sit down in December with all the boards and committees in the school committee, and we have actual data about how our revenues actually finished, and some forecasts and some assumptions about where we're going to go. Otherwise, you have to be able to manage expectations, and you only do that through having good information. We don't have that information sitting here today. So
Thank you, John. Any other questions from members of the board? Julianne?
Well, this is overwhelming. $4.5 million plus the 1.5 from CARES. That's a lot of money. And it does sound extremely complicated. I've been trying to figure it out, trying to do my own research, and yeah, there's, you know, different lists for what it can be used and what it can't be used. But I was number one, very happy to hear that you have engaged a consultant, even though it doesn't sound like it's a huge amount of help. It's at least something to give you, you know, some help with this process, which sounds pretty overwhelming. And I, for one, would support getting whatever help you need to work this through, because whatever you pay at that end, it, you know, to make sure that we by 2024 use our $4.5 million, I think it's worth the expenditure. But I have a couple of questions, and one is, so Joan, when you mentioned the health insurance is going to be probably increasing, are you saying that ARPA might help with that?
well, ARPA, unlike the CARES Act and the CARES Act and FEMA is direct expenses related to the pandemic. ARPA, those funds can be used as general revenue replacement. So if it comes in and it's brought in as a revenue for the budget process, then it can be spent on arguably anything that our budget process would do if it comes in as a. See, it has to qualify under the formula, and I gave you the IGR or the bulletin about that formula. But if we lost enough revenues, those funds can be brought in as revenue replacement and would be used through the normal budget process. And we think, based on some preliminary numbers, there's the devil's in the details with this stuff. But based on some preliminary scenarios that Jason has run, we think that that all of that money would be able to flow through as a revenue replacement. Now, just to put this into context, it sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But if you take $4.5 million and you divide it up over 2 fiscal years, which is what we're talking about here, it's 3%. It's 3% on a $74 million budget. So yes, it's a lot of money, but it's not, it's still on the size of our budget. It's it's marginal. It's marginal, but it will help us. And the idea is help us as we start to see what's happening with our revenues coming back, our revenues back to where they were. And then the other piece is, what do we, we're going to have additional expenses in fiscal 2023 pandemic related. Like, I just don't know what they are. Is it testing? Are they clinics? What else is out there? But through the ARPA funding, you can take their funding in as revenue replacement. Now that you could not use the CARES Act for. And that was my biggest complaint about the CARES Act is we have rubber gloves coming out of our ears and masks, right? But what did we need? We needed revenue replacement. So ARPA funding is the primary use that most of my colleagues that I've spoken to, most of them are focused on that as revenue replacement, because then it comes through and it's just part of your budget process. It becomes a revenue source to fund schools, pandemic expenses, public safety, everything that you need. Now you have to be careful and judicial about how you use it, because it's limited. You're going to get that infusion over 2 fiscal years, and it'll be helpful. But the idea is that your revenues and the economy will come back over that time and replace them with recurring revenue so that you don't have a structural deficit. So that's all the contextual financial information that I've been talking about. Like, we need to be, you can make these decisions, but you need to know. It's kind of like when we used, think of it this way, when we used some additional free cash, some financial reserves to bolster our fiscal 21 budget. You have to have an exit plan for how do you get out of that, right? Because it creates a structural deficit that is going to come back to you next year. So, but the best thing about ARPA is it's revenue replacement. And there's a formula over multiple fiscal years, and there's an escalator in that formula of 4.1% that we can use that would basically allow us to take in the majority, if not all of that money as just a general revenue, because that's one of what it's intended for.
So can a town actually use all of the money for revenue replacement?
If you lost based on the formula, the answer is yes. If based on the formula, you can show that you lost those revenues. And right now on
what we've lost?
On a preliminary basis, we believe it's not just what you lost in revenue. So it's where you were before the pandemic hit. It's what you lost, and then there's a 4.1% escalation, because the assumption is that the national average for revenue of state and local revenue increases is 4.1%. So that's where they use that as the benchmark. When you run through that formula with our actual revenues, now again, with the caveat that we need to be clear about what's a revenue for purposes of this formula and what's not. Revolving fund, like recreation funds, not. Revolving fund money from the bistro that we use to fund this program, that's not a revenue. But when you run through that program, yes, we believe that most, if not all, of this funding could be brought in as for revenue replacement, which would give us the broadest ability to use those funds. Again, with the caveat that We don't want to create a structural deficit, so we need to be careful about how we use it. But if you're running at things like clinics, these are one-time, clinics and response, these are things that, if they recur, means the pandemic's going on, then it'll be another issue, but we just need to be careful how we use it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's okay. And do you have an idea of how much revenue we have lost in millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars? A number?
It's
TBD.
lost. Yeah, I don't want to speak out of turn. We're running some numbers, but on a preliminary basis, we believe that over the years that we can use these ARPA funds, that the revenues we lost, coupled with the escalation formula that the federal government's providing, we believe that all of those, the 4.5 could be used as revenue replacement. Yes, we took a pretty significant hit on particularly hotel meals, motor vehicle excise, so. But that formula and that calculation is something we're working on. And right now, if you're a finance director in a town or a town administrator, those are the questions that you're asking. Like, I'm frustrated. Like, think about this. Our recreation program was 100% self-supportive with fees, right? When we shut down, no fees came in. That whole department moved over to the general fund, right? That was a significant cost, but they don't consider that for purposes of the formula. Those revolving fund revenues, those aren't revenues. So that's why we need to make sure that we're clear about what qualifies, what doesn't, what the time period is, what the benchmark data is. And again, the next round of data point that we need to factor in what we lost for revenues is December of this year. So actually it's January 1st of next year. So we don't even have that data point yet. So to work that formula for the subsequent year. So I mean, it's great that this money came through, but I got to tell you that they could not have made it more difficult and complicated.
Well, it's still great that it
is great. Yes. It is great. Yes.
So when you refer to normal budgeting process, just so that, like to respond to the resident who called about where a person would have input into, with of course, going through the criteria of how it can be used, they would pay attention to financial committee meetings where we have public comment and appropriations, and because before it gets to town meeting, we'd like to have all of that, organized. So that would be where they would go.
Yes, and again, I would emphasize, it's unfortunate the way it's been portrayed in some communities and how it's been politicized. This isn't a wish list. This isn't a throw it open to the community and like, I read in the paper, they're talking, one community is talking about putting in a public pool. How that qualifies is beyond me. But they're creating expectations that I don't believe they're going to be able to meet. And so it's good to have those discussions and to get that input, but it needs to be done in the proper context because if you can't do a public swimming pool, then why would you want to open it up for people to suggest that? You know what I mean? So there has to be context. And that's one of the things that we've done very well in our community is as we move into the budget process, the school department doesn't come in and say, we want a 9% increase in our budget. And then after the fact, we say we can only afford a 3.5% increase. That's why we start with this information and these benchmarks in this context so that we manage expectations about really what's realistic. And there will be room for discretion in there, absolutely. And there will be judgment calls, but it's not a free for all and it isn't a wish list. And the point of going out and listening to the community, that really is focused on populations in need that are very hard hit, the poor sections in some communities and the people that were disenfranchised most during this pandemic. That's not our demographic in Northborough. So, again, you'll see people, and we saw people spending their CARES Act money on things that there's no way it's going to get reimbursed. So be careful when you look at and read about what other communities are doing and how they're approaching things. It's not necessarily what we want to emulate.
Yes, and we are fortunate to, to have had few casualties, but back to what Leslie was asking about with small businesses and households, if a business is not a member of the Chamber of Commerce, where would they go for assistance?
Well, the great thing about the Chamber of Commerce is if a small business has a question and they're not a member, they've been willing to help them. So there's also the Small Business Association. There are a number of places that they can go. And again, when you say help them, you have to be careful. What do you mean by that? What we've done is
all of this.
we're helping them by making sure that we're communicating and they're aware of what programs are out there at the state and federal level to help them. The other thing that's happening is, we're getting the ARPA funds directly. The state is not an intermediary, as is the case with the CARES Act. In the CARES Act, the state decided to create this program and distribute it by population and create this whole set of convoluted rules and regulations. They're not involved. The ARPA funding is coming directly to us. We are going to be dealing directly with the federal government. But where I was going with this is the state is getting over $5 billion. I've read $5.3 billion directly. So the state is going to have all kinds of programs that are going to be coming available for businesses, for individuals. And so as that money makes its way through the legislature and they determine how they're spending that money, there'll be additional grant programs for us, hopefully. There'll be more support for the business community. There'll be, I'm sure, because we've heard so much about this, more resources will definitely be dedicated to communities that are in need. We have this conversation all the time. We, Northborough, we don't get a lot of that assistance because in the view of the state and the federal government, we don't need it because we're a fairly well-off community. So we get some, but not the same level. So we're going to see lots of programs, lots of grants and things that are going to be coming out, and we're watching that. Now that will create, again, an additional administrative burden on us as we pursue these grants. And that's something we'll need to talk about, like how do we best position ourselves from a staffing standpoint to take advantage of some of these things. But we'll see how that rolls out. I'll add one more thing I did want to mention. So at the Purple Heart ceremony, when it was concluded, I always use it an opportunity to lobby and poke at my friends at the state legislature. So Megan Kilcoyne was there, Danielle Gregoire was there, and we talked to them about what's the state doing. And one of the things that we're really trying to encourage the state to do is if they have these funds to run them through, largely existing programs. And I said, rather than create some convoluted infrastructure grant program, why don't you take that money and run it through the Chapter 90 formula that impacts everybody? And so that's the feedback that I've been giving. That's the feedback I've been giving on the Mass Municipal Association's Fiscal Policy Committee for the message going back to the state. But the state, the governor wants to put his mark on it. The legislature wants to put their mark on it. But I can tell you when you create these little special programs, the majority of the money will go to, arguably, appropriately, to the communities in need. So a disproportionate amount of the money is going to go to the Bostons, the Springfields, the Fall Rivers. That's where it's going to go. And we'll have less opportunity for us to take advantage of that. There will be opportunity, but you hear about a lot of these programs, and when we look into them, we're told, don't bother, you're not going to qualify. So, but we go after everything that we can when we can.
Well, again, thank you very much. And I hope we get some updates like this every now and then. It's been really helpful. Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome.
Thank you, Julian. I just had a couple of questions, John. We mentioned earlier that due to the revenue reductions, one thing that we pared back on was the OPEB contributions over the past couple of years. Um, is this funding something that would just simply restart that, or is it something that would even backfill some of that?
Yeah. So there are some exclusions in ARPA. ARPA funding cannot be used to pay down unfunded liabilities for pensions. You cannot put it in your rainy day fund. So there's a few constraints on how you can use this money. One thing it didn't mention was OPEB, but they won't allow you to use it to pay unfunded liability for pension. Do they include that or interpret that to mean OPEB or not? That's one of the things we don't have an answer on. However,
we did get an answer on that.
Oh, did we?
There was one of the frequently asked, and again, I hate to get in the weeds with this, but one of the frequently asked questions that released was, is an eligible use OPEB? Well, OPEB stands for other post-employment benefits. So does that mean, are you allowed to put it in a trust fund, which would seem to contradict the other things about prohibitions against putting money in rainy day funds and paying down pensions? So again, getting in the weeds of this, we're direct recipients. The state isn't going to give us a definitive answer, but there's been a lot of talk with the Mass Society of CPAs and the state and the federal government, and it seems to be believed that contributions to the OPEB trust fund in comparison to paying for pay-as-you-go OPEB retiree health insurance is allowable. So that answer I just got last week, and again, the federal government opened a portal to U.S. Treasury, and all they do is refer you to their frequently asked questions. And I swear the questions are deliberately vague because, again, it sounds helpful to say that OPEB is allowable, but I mean, what is meant by when they say OPEB? But they have since somewhat clarified from people from administration and finance have clarified that OPEB does mean contributions to a trust fund. So that is an eligible use. It's not excluded.
Yeah.
So sorry to cut you off, John.
No, that's great. That's relatively, this just goes to show how this stuff is unfolding in real time. And this is how we spend our day, like asking these questions, getting vague answers back, asking clarifying questions. But Jason, the point I think that you were trying to make, Jason Perot, chairman, is that, the way we dealt with the initial impacts of the pandemic, one of the ways was to postpone our OPEB contribution. Now, the analogy that I use is, look, if you, in your private life, if you lose your job, right, something really bad happens, you get sick or you lose your job, one of the first things that you do is you stop putting money into your retirement account, right? Because you need your resources right now because it's an emergency. That's kind of what we did. But now that we're coming out of the emergency and things are getting back to whatever this new normal is, we can't just ignore the fact that we haven't contributed. So arguably, we should be putting at least $500,000 in. We skipped $1 million in total over 2 years, and we should be trying to make up for lost time. So that is a part of, that's going to be part of the discussion, is like, what are we going to do with OPEB? Are we going to use a big chunk of this money to fund it and get back? We need to get back. We need to get $500,000 one way or another back into the operating budget to get back to where we were making those annual contributions to OPEB. The complicating factor, as I mentioned earlier, is we may have a health insurance budget issue on the horizon, and literally we're meeting on that last week, and we're going out to bid. Our loss ratios right now are pretty ugly. They're running over 100%. So I'm not anticipating we're not going to get a zero renewal on health insurance this year, guys. It's going to put a major crimp on the budget for sure. So again, this stuff all unfolds in real time. I don't have all the information. We need to close out fiscal 21, get those data points. We need to close out the CARES Act and the FEMA, find out what we're getting reimbursed for, what we're not. Put that data into our trend monitoring, make some assumptions, put a forecast, and then kind of see where we are in December. That's the time frame I see before we're going to have any useful information for you. So, and that's the normal
Leslie,
time frame.
did you have another question?
Yeah, I did. I'm going to ask this. I'm not sure if it's going to make sense. Okay, ARPA. is for revenue replacement, and we have through December 31, 2024 to obligate or return these funds. How do we determine what the endpoint is going to be in determining revenue loss? Since, okay, the end date is 2024, and there may be other variants that come up and we have further issues and further losses. At what point do we make a decision that, okay, this is the amount of revenue loss that we have, and this is how we're going to determine revenue replacement and be able to help people out? You know, how do we, what's the endpoint? What's the finite period?
Well, there's a formula and there are data points in the formula. If you look at the bulletin that we gave you of the data points that we have to use, and the reality is nobody knows what's going to happen. So just like FEMA was a 75% reimbursement, and then all of a sudden President Biden gets elected, he comes in and says, as of February, it's 100% reimbursement. So we were putting 75% to FEMA, 25% to CARES. And then just based on his announcement, that changes. So what's going to happen, nobody knows. What will happen is there'll be further guidance. They'll change the rules. They'll clarify things as we progress, depending on what happens. And we're just going to have to remain flexible and appropriately conservative. You know, the last thing I want is people walking away thinking this is just some big pool of money. We're going to get some big wish list. We're going to build swimming pools just because some community stated that. It's ridiculous. But we'll do our process. They do their process would be what I would say.
And I would add that our process tends to be a leader, not a follower in that regard. So my trust is in our town administration and our boards and committees and our financial policies to properly understand and then deploy whatever funding we're eligible to use. Any other questions, comments for the board? Seeing none. John and Jason, thank you very much. Appreciate all this information. I think it's important to hear this now and understand what you're grappling with in terms of the board burden of the administrative process, and have the right expectations for ourselves and for members of the public.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jason.
Next up is execution of cemetery deeds 1127 and 1128, and my assignee for this motion is the member of the board who is absent this evening. So I'm wondering if someone else can step up and make this important motion. Julianne.
Mr. Chairman, I move the board vote to execute cemetery deeds 1127 and 1128.
Moved by Julianne Hirsch, seconded by Scott Rogers. This is a roll call vote. Julianne Hirsch.
Aye.
Scott Rogers.
Aye.
Leslie Rutan.
Aye.
And I, Jason Perot, vote aye. Carries 4 in favor. Any other business to come before the board, John?
I have no other business this evening.
Okay, Julianne, you have something?
I do. I was just wondering, has the warrant been approved? Our town meeting warrant and articles been approved by the state yet?
We just got approval from the AG's office. Yes, we just got that.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Yep. They took their time this cycle through for sure.
Yeah. Julianne, you're referring to the zoning bylaws that were approved at town meeting, right?
Well, the whole, don't they have to approve the whole warrant?
No, they don't
just the
approve the whole
zoning
warrant,
bylaws.
just bylaws. But I have the memo that I did send it to town council. There were some, as oftentimes when they approve it, they'll have some commentary about, well, we're not going to disapprove this, but be careful that it runs afoul of some state law or something like that. So I sent it to council, but I'll send up the memo off that we received to the board, and you guys can take a look at it.
So then that the one article that did determine, a change in fining and things like that for the zoning officer, was that one that is in question?
Nope. I believe that one was approved. Some of the other zoning I don't know. I don't want to speak out of turn. I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but they commented on several of the articles, and which is not uncommon. More often than not, when the AG reviews it, they're reviewing it to make sure that what we're doing is constitutional. It doesn't run afoul of superseding statutes or regulations. And where sometimes it's not a black and white, where it might if you go in this direction, and it might not if you apply it this way. So you don't always get a black and white answer. So those are the commentaries that we got, and that's why I sent it to council. Usually I have him take a look at it, and then if there's any clarifying information that needs to be put out, we do. But as of right now, we got what we're going to get from the AG's office. We got it at the end of last week.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Julianne. If there's nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Scott Rogers.
Second.
I move we adjourn. As a first.
Seconded by Julianne Hirsch and then subsequently moved by Scott Rogers. This is a roll call vote. Julianne Hirsch.
Aye.
Scott Rogers.
Aye.
Leslie Rutan.
Aye.
Jason Perot votes aye. And I just want to add one final comment. I want to thank Northborough Cable Access for providing our technology and broadcast support on local cable television this evening. I did not mention them at the start of the meeting. So thank you all very much. Appreciate your time and effort here tonight, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Good night.
Good night.